students filmed themselves bullying the poor black kid at an elite school. When they discovered his real identity, his father's reaction made the whole school fall silent. Marcus Thompson sat alone at the far corner of Westbrook Academy's pristine cafeteria, his beige sweater and worn jeans standing out against the sea of crisp uniforms surrounding him. The 12-year-old picked at his untouched lunch, his shoulders hunched as whispers and stares followed his every move. "That's him. The illegitimate one," a girl's voice carried across the room. "Can you believe, Mr. Thompson actually acknowledged him?" Marcus's grip tightened on his fork. 3 weeks had passed since the DNA test results changed everything, since his father, billionaire James Thompson, had shown up at his door with lawyers and paperwork. The memory was still fresh. His small apartment, his mother's tear-stained face, the words that turned his world upside down. "Marcus," Principal Williams's voice cut through the cafeteria noise. The man towered over Marcus's table, his perfectly pressed suit matching his rigid posture. "Your sweater violates dress code." "Again?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Sorry, sir. My uniforms are still being tailored. This is Westbrook Academy, young man. We have standards." Principal Williams's lips thinned. "Standards that have been maintained for over 100 years. The meaning was clear. You don't belong here." "Yes, sir." Marcus's voice came out barely above a whisper. As Principal Williams walked away, snickers erupted from nearby tables. Marcus forced himself to stay still, to keep his face neutral, even as his chest tightened. He'd learned the hard way that reactions only made things worse. The cafeteria doors swung open, and a group of 8th graders swaggered in. Marcus's heart rate spiked. Bradley Morrison and his friends. They'd made it their personal mission to remind Marcus of his place since day one. "Hey, charity case." Bradley's voice boomed across the room. Still pretending to be a Thompson? Marcus stared at his plate, willing himself to become invisible. "It didn't work. I'm talking to you, hood rat." Bradley's hand slammed down on the table, making Marcus's tray jump. "What's wrong? Forgot how to speak English at your ghetto school? Leave me alone," Marcus muttered, his voice shaking. "Please, leave me alone," Bradley mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Please, massa." His friends burst into laughter. Marcus's face burned. He could feel his mother's absence, like a physical ache. She would have known what to say, how to handle this. But she was gone, disappeared 3 months ago, leaving nothing but a hastily scribbled note. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." The DNA test had come 2 weeks later. James Thompson, seeing his ex-girlfriend's name in the papers regarding a missing persons case, had connected the dots and demanded answers. 1 cheek swab later, and Marcus had a father, a stranger who lived in a mansion and ran a Fortune 500 company. "Oops." Bradley's voice dripped with fake concern as his elbow accidentally caught Marcus's milk carton, sending it sprawling across the table. White liquid splashed across Marcus's sweater and jeans. "My bad," Bradley smirked. "Guess white just doesn't look good on you, huh?" Laughter erupted around them. Phones appeared, recording Marcus's humiliation. He could hear the clicks of photos being taken, knew they'd be all over social media within minutes. "Mr. Morrison," a teacher's voice called out. "That's enough." But it was too late. Marcus's clothes were soaked, and the damage was done. He stood up, chair scraping against the floor, and grabbed his backpack. His vision blurred as he rushed toward the exit, Bradley's voice following him. "Run away. That's what you people do best, right?" Marcus burst into the nearest bathroom, his hands shaking as he grabbed paper towels. The milk had already soaked through his sweater, leaving large wet patches that would take hours to dry. In the mirror, his reflection stared back, a scared kid trying to play dress-up in a world that didn't want him. His phone buzzed. A text from his father. Meeting ran long. Won't make it to dinner. Mrs. Parker will heat something up for you. Marcus's throat tightened. Of course. James Thompson was always busy, always in meetings, always somewhere else. The man had given Marcus his name and a roof over his head, but that was it. They were strangers living in the same massive house, orbiting each other like distant planets. The bathroom door creaked open. Marcus's heart stopped as Bradley and 3 of his friends walked in, phones held high. "Ah, look at that." Bradley's voice echoed off the tiles. The fake Thompson is crying. I'm not crying, Marcus said, but his voice cracked. Sure looks like crying to me. Bradley moved closer, his phone recording everything. What's wrong? Missing your crackhead mom? Marcus's fists clenched. Don't talk about my mom? Or what? Bradley's face twisted into an ugly sneer. You'll call Daddy? Oh wait, he doesn't want you either. Why else would he ship you off to boarding school next semester? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He hadn't known about boarding school. Was it true? Was his father already trying to get rid of him? Just leave me alone, Marcus pleaded, hating how weak he sounded. Please. You heard him, boys. Bradley's grin widened. The charity case wants to be alone. Let's help him out. Before Marcus could react, hands grabbed his backpack, yanking it away. Another shove sent him stumbling backward, his head hitting the bathroom wall with a dull thud. Welcome to Westbrook, hood rat. Bradley laughed, his phone still recording. Hope you're enjoying your stay. The door swung shut behind them, leaving Marcus alone with his soaked clothes and burning humiliation. He slid down the wall, wrapping his arms around his knees, and finally let the tears fall. In his pocket, his phone buzzed again. Probably another text from his father's assistant, or maybe more taunts from numbers he didn't recognize. Marcus didn't check. He just sat there, the cold tile seeping through his wet clothes, wondering how much longer he could survive in a world that seemed determined to break him. The final bell would ring in 20 minutes. Another day at Westbrook Academy. Another reminder that no matter what a DNA test said, he would never truly be a Thompson. The bathroom door creaked open again. Marcus quickly wiped his eyes, but it wasn't Bradley this time. Principal Williams stood in the doorway, his face a mask of practiced concern. Mr. Thompson, he said, emphasizing the name with subtle mockery. Why aren't you in class? Marcus gestured to his milk-stained clothes. I was just trying to clean up, sir, and making quite a mess doing so. Williams's eyes swept over the scattered paper towels. This isn't your old public school, Marcus. We expect better here. The word stung, but Marcus had learned to keep his face neutral. He gathered the paper towels, aware of Williams watching his every move. The incident in the cafeteria, Williams continued, Mr. Morrison claims it was an accident. It wasn't. The words slipped out before Marcus could stop them. Williams's eyebrows rose. Are you calling one of our most respected students a liar? Marcus's phone buzzed again. Then again. And again. He knew without looking what it was. The video from the bathroom was probably already circulating. No, sir, Marcus mumbled. Good. Williams straightened his tie. Then I trust we won't have any more disruptions today. Your next class started 5 minutes ago. I suggest you hurry. Marcus grabbed his backpack, now damp from being thrown on the bathroom floor. As he passed Williams, the principal added, and Marcus, do try to be less sensitive. Accidents happen. The hallway was empty, his footsteps echoing against the lockers. Marcus's phone kept buzzing. Finally, he pulled it out. 20 new messages, all from unknown numbers. Go back to the hood where you belong. Fake Thompson crying like a baby. Daddy's money can't buy class. Video attachment. Ghetto kid crying at Westbrook. Marcus's hands shook as he shoved the phone back in his pocket. He'd learned the hard way not to block the numbers. They just created new ones. When he reached his locker, he stopped dead, his breath caught in his throat. Someone had written fake across the door in thick black marker. Below it, a racial slur stood out in angry red letters. No phones in the hallway, Mr. Thompson. Marcus jumped. Mrs. Henderson, his English teacher, stood behind him, frowning at his phone. He gestured helplessly at his locker. Her eyes widened slightly at the graffiti, but her voice remained stern. Get to class. I'll have the janitor take care of this. Inside the classroom, snickers greeted his entrance. Bradley sat in the back, surrounded by his usual crowd, all of them grinning at their phones. Marcus slid into his seat, feeling the weight of 24 stares. As I was saying, Mrs. Henderson continued her lesson. The theme of belonging in The Outsiders is particularly relevant. Marcus tried to focus on her words, but his phone kept vibrating. The messages weren't just from Westbrook students anymore. Somehow, The video had spread to his old school too. "Traitor, think you are better than us now." "Rich boy crying," the words blurred together. His chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. "Mr. Thompson? Mrs. Henderson's voice sounded far away. "The answer, please?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Someone in the back of the room made a whimpering sound, and others laughed. "If you're not prepared," Mrs. Henderson said, "perhaps you should spend more time studying and less time causing disruptions." The bell couldn't ring fast enough. Marcus bolted from the room, but Bradley's voice followed him. "Running home to Daddy? Oh, wait. He doesn't want you either." More laughter, more phone cameras, more messages. Marcus made it through 2 more classes somehow, even though he couldn't remember a single word any teacher said. During the final period, a note landed on his desk. "Meet us behind the gym after school. Unless you're scared, fake Thompson." His hands trembled as he crumpled the note. He'd heard stories about what happened behind the gym. That's where Bradley's group taught lessons to kids who didn't know their place. When the final bell rang, Marcus stayed in his seat, pretending to organize his books until the room emptied. Maybe if he waited long enough, they'd get bored and leave. His phone buzzed with a new message. This one from his father's assistant. "Mr. Thompson will be working late again. Don't wait up for dinner." Something broke inside Marcus. The tears he'd been holding back all day spilled over. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Marcus?" He looked up to find Ms. Carter, the school counselor, standing in the doorway. Her face softened with concern. "I saw what happened to your locker," she said gently. "Do you want to talk about it?" Marcus opened his mouth to say no, to give the same rehearsed "I'm fine" he always did. Instead, a choked sob escaped. "Ms. Carter closed the door and pulled up a chair. "How long has this been going on?" "Since I got here." Marcus's voice cracked. "But it's getting worse. Have you told your father?" Marcus shook his head. "He's always busy. And I don't want to disappoint him. Being bullied isn't your fault, Marcus. Everything's my fault." The words burst out. "I'm the reason Mom left. I'm the reason everyone at my old school hates me now. I'm the reason Dad's reputation is ruined. Everyone knew about the DNA test. It was in all the papers. Billionaire's secret love child. I'm just a mistake he's stuck with. Ms." Carter reached for the box of tissues on the desk, but before she could speak, Marcus's phone lit up with another message. He glanced at it automatically, then felt the blood drain from his face. It was a photo of his mother's note, the one she'd left when she disappeared. The one he kept hidden in his desk drawer at home. Someone had been in his room. Below the photo was a message. "Wonder what the papers would say about this? Mommy abandoned you because you're a pathetic mistake. Maybe you should follow her example and disappear too." The phone slipped from Marcus's numb fingers, clattering on the desk. The room started spinning. "Marcus?" "Ms." Carter's voice sounded very far away. "Marcus, breathe. Look at me. Just breathe." But he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at his mother's handwriting on the screen, at the words that had shattered his world 3 months ago. And somewhere in the building, Bradley Morrison was probably laughing, planning his next attack, knowing he had finally found the one thing that could truly break Marcus Thompson. The Thompson mansion's kitchen felt too big, too empty, too quiet. Marcus pushed his eggs around his plate, trying to ignore the crushing silence. Across the massive marble island, James Thompson tapped away on his phone, his own breakfast untouched. "You should eat," James said without looking up. "Mrs. Parker made those eggs specially." Marcus forced down a bite. The housekeeper had been trying her best to make him feel welcome, but food had lost its taste weeks ago. "Your uniform arrives today," James continued, still focused on his phone. "Principal Williams called about your inappropriate attire." Marcus's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "He called you?" James finally glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Something about maintaining standards. You understand, don't you? Appearance matters at Westbrook." The eggs turned to ash in Marcus's mouth. Of course Williams had called. The man never missed a chance to point out Marcus's failures. "I understand," Marcus mumbled. James checked his Rolex. Car's waiting. I have an early board meeting. Dad. Marcus's voice cracked on the word. He still wasn't used to saying it. Yes. James paused at the kitchen door. Could we maybe have dinner together tonight? A flicker of something? Guilt? Annoyance? Crossed James's face. We'll see. Depends how the merger talks go. He was gone before Marcus could respond. The drive to school was silent. Thomas, the chauffeur, kept glancing at Marcus in the rearview mirror, but didn't comment on his red eyes or the way his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number saw Daddy leaving early again, too ashamed to be seen with his mistake. The campus loomed ahead, its brick walls and manicured lawns feeling more like a prison than a school. As Thomas pulled up to the entrance, Marcus's stomach churned at the sight waiting for him. Bradley and his friends lounged by the steps, phones ready. They'd been there every morning this week, recording Marcus's arrival, adding commentary about charity cases and diversity hires. Would you like me to walk you in? Thomas asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. I'm fine. He wasn't, but what could Thomas do? What could anyone do? The moment he stepped out of the car, the phones came up. There he is. Daddy's little mistake. Show us some tears. Fake Thompson. Marcus kept his head down, clutching his backpack like a shield. He was almost to the door when Bradley's foot shot out. Marcus stumbled, catching himself against the railing. Oops, Bradley smirked. Guess coordination isn't genetic, huh? Inside wasn't any better. Fresh graffiti covered Marcus's locker, worse than yesterday's. Someone had printed photos of his mother, old social media pictures, and plastered them everywhere. Like mother, like son, was scrawled across them in red marker. Marcus's vision blurred. He deleted those pictures months ago, after she left. How had they found them? Mr. Thompson. Principal Williams's voice made him jump. Defacing school property is a serious offense. Marcus stared at him in disbelief. I didn't. This is your final warning? Williams's eyes were cold. One more incident, and we'll have to discuss your future at Westbrook. The hallway filled with whispers and stifled laughs as Williams walked away. Marcus's hands shook as he tried his locker combination. It took 3 attempts to get it open. Inside was worse. His books were shredded, pages torn and scattered. His gym clothes were missing. And taped to the back was a printed email, one Marcus recognized with horror. It was from the boarding school, the one his father had been quietly arranging to send him to next semester. Told you Daddy doesn't want you. Bradley's voice came from behind. January can't come fast enough, right? Marcus slammed the locker shut and ran. He didn't care where he was going, didn't care about classes or assignments or anything else. He just needed to get away. He ended up in the cafeteria. It was empty this early, the blue-tiled walls echoing with his ragged breathing. Marcus collapsed at his usual corner table, pressing his forehead against the cool surface. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Check your email, Fake Thompson. Got a present for you. Mommy says hi, with trembling fingers. Marcus opened his email. The first message was from an anonymous account. The subject line made his heart stop, like mother, like son. The attachment was a video. His mother, clearly drunk, arguing with someone outside a bar. The timestamp was from last week. Found your runaway mommy. The email read. Guess the Thompson name was too much for her too. Wonder how much the papers would pay for this. Marcus's chest seized. He couldn't breathe. The cafeteria walls seemed to close in, spinning wildly. His mother's face filled his phone screen, her words slurring together. And all he could hear was Bradley's laughter mixing with Williams's threats mixing with his father's silence. A sound escaped him, something between a sob and a scream. His phone clattered to the floor as he doubled over, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Marcus? A voice penetrated the fog. MS. Carter again. Oh my God, Marcus! He was aware of her kneeling beside him, of other teachers gathering, of someone calling the nurse. But all he could see was his mother's face. All he could hear was Bradley's voice. Daddy doesn't want you. I need to call your father. MS. Carter was saying. No. Marcus grabbed her arm. Please don't. This has gone too far. She picked up his phone, her face hardening as she saw the messages. This isn't just bullying anymore, Marcus. This is harassment. This is criminal. The nurse arrived with a paper bag, trying to help Marcus breathe. More teachers gathered. Someone was talking about calling the police. Principal Williams appeared, his face tight with barely concealed annoyance. "Perhaps," Williams said, "Mr. Thompson is simply not suited for Westbrook's rigorous environment." Something snapped inside Marcus. Through the tears, through the panic, through the crushing weight of weeks of torment, one thought crystallized. He wasn't the problem. He'd never been the problem. "Call my father," he whispered. "MS." Carter squeezed his hand. "Are you sure?" Marcus nodded, his voice stronger now. "Call him. Call him right now." James Thompson answered on the third ring. And for the first time since the DNA test changed everything, Marcus told his father the whole truth. When he finished, the cafeteria was dead silent. Even Williams had stopped making excuses. James's voice came through the phone speaker, cold and sharp as steel. "I'm calling 911. Nobody leaves that building until the police arrive. Do you understand me, Principal Williams? Nobody leaves." And finally, after weeks of fear and silence, Marcus Thompson began to breathe again. Police sirens pierced the morning calm at Westbrook Academy. Through the cafeteria windows, Marcus watched 3 patrol cars pull up to the main entrance, their lights painting the brick walls in alternating red and blue. "Stay here, MS." Carter squeezed his shoulder. "I'll handle this." Principal Williams paced near the door, his composed facade cracking. "This is completely unnecessary. We could handle this internally, like you've been handling it so far." "MS." Carter's voice dripped with contempt. She held up Marcus's phone, still displaying the threatening messages. "This is criminal harassment, Richard. These are minors distributing explicit threats and blackmail." The cafeteria doors burst open. James Thompson strode in, his usual pristine suit slightly rumpled, his face set in granite. 2 police officers followed, along with a woman in a blazer who introduced herself as Detective Sarah Chun. "Dad." Marcus started to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. James reached him in 3 long strides, dropping to one knee beside his son's chair. For the first time since the DNA test, he really looked at Marcus, saw the dark circles under his eyes, the trembling hands, the fear etched into every line of his 12-year-old face. "I'm sorry," James's voice cracked. "God, Marcus, I'm so sorry." "Mr. Thompson?" Detective Chin approached quietly. "We need to take your son's statement." Marcus gripped his father's sleeve. "Don't leave. I'm not going anywhere." James pulled up a chair, his shoulder touching Marcus's. "Not this time." The next hour passed in a blur of questions and documentation. Detective Chin recorded everything while another officer photographed Marcus's vandalized locker and the threatening messages. Marcus's voice shook as he described the daily torment, the accidents, the racial slurs, the escalating threats. "In this video of your mother," Chin asked gently, "they're threatening to release it to the media?" Marcus nodded. James's hand tightened on his shoulder. "They've been in our house," Marcus whispered. "They got into my room, found Mom's note." "We'll need to dust for prints," Chin told her partner. "Mr. Thompson, we'll need access to your security system. Whatever you need." James's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "I want them all arrested." "Dad," Marcus started. "No." James turned to face him fully. "This ends today. I don't care whose children they are or what strings their parents think they can pull. They're going to face consequences." Through the cafeteria windows, Marcus could see more cars arriving, expensive ones. Parents answering the police summons, their faces a mix of outrage and fear as they were directed to the main office. Bradley Morrison was the first student brought in for questioning. His usual swagger vanished when he saw the police officers. "My father's a lawyer," he stammered. "You can't." "Save it for the detective." The officer guided him toward an empty classroom. Principal Williams hovered nearby, wringing his hands. "Surely we can resolve this without involving the authorities. Think of the school's reputation." "The school's reputation?" James stood so quickly his chair toppled backward. "My son was terrorized under your watch. You ignored his complaints, dismissed the evidence, and blamed the victim. You're lucky I'm only pressing criminal charges and not suing this institution into bankruptcy." Williams blanched. Mr. Thompson, please. Principal Williams? Detective Chin cut in. We'll need to see all records of reported incidents involving Marcus Thompson. Every email, every complaint, every disciplinary action you chose to ignore. More students were brought in for questioning. Some broke down crying. Others tried to claim innocence. A few pointed fingers at Bradley, trying to save themselves. Marcus watched it all through a strange fog of exhaustion and relief. His phone sat silent now, tagged as evidence. The halls outside were empty, all students confined to classrooms while the investigation proceeded. Marcus, MS. Carter appeared with a cup of water. How are you holding up? He took a shaky sip. I don't know. The school board is on their way, she said. Emergency meeting. This goes way beyond just your case. We're looking at systemic failures in bullying prevention, racial discrimination. They'll try to bury it, Marcus mumbled. Not this time. James pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a news alert. The story was already breaking. Elite prep school under investigation. Racial harassment and criminal threats against Millionaire's son. Marcus's stomach churned at the headline. Everyone will know. Good. James's voice was firm. Let them know. Let them see what happened here. No more hiding, no more silence. Detective Chun returned with more questions. They went through everything again. Every incident, every threat, every moment of fear and isolation. James's face grew darker with each revelation. Each detail he'd been too busy to notice. I should have protected you, he whispered when Chin stepped away. I should have seen. You're here now, Marcus said. A commotion erupted outside. Bradley Morrison's father had arrived. All-expensive suit and blustering threats. This is absurd. My son would never. We have the evidence, Mr. Morrison. Detective Chin's voice carried clearly. Your son recorded himself participating in racial harassment and blackmail. He distributed threats from your home IP address. Would you like to see the timestamps? The blustering stopped. By noon, the school was in chaos. News vans gathered outside the gates. Parents rushed in and out, some crying, others arguing with police. The school board arrived looking grim. Lawyers began appearing. What happens now? Marcus asked as another student was led away for questioning. Now? James squeezed his shoulder. Now we make sure this never happens to anyone else. No more covering up, no more looking the other way. They wanted to talk about the Thompson name? Fine. Let's show them what that name can really do. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt something besides fear. Something that might have been hope. Detective Chun approached again, her face serious. We've identified the main instigators. Bradley Morrison has confessed to leading the harassment campaign. Several others are cooperating, providing evidence. Mr. Thompson, we'll need formal statements from both you and Marcus to proceed with charges. James nodded. Whatever it takes. Marcus? Chin's voice softened. Are you ready to tell us everything? And I mean everything, not just what happened here, but at home too? The boarding school threats, the break-in, all of it. Marcus looked at his father, saw the pain and determination in his eyes, and made his decision. No more hiding. No more silence. Yes, he said. I'm ready. The principal's office had never felt smaller. Marcus sat between his father and Detective Chun, facing a room full of people who'd spent weeks ignoring his pain. Principal Williams occupied his usual chair, but his usual authority had evaporated. The school board members lined one wall, their faces grim. Bradley Morrison and his parents sat opposite, their lawyer whispering urgently in their ears. Let's review the security footage, Detective Chin said, opening her laptop. The first video played on the wall-mounted screen. Bradley and his friends following Marcus into the bathroom, phones recording his humiliation. Then the cafeteria incident, the hallway confrontations. One after another, evidence of systematic harassment unfolded in high definition. Turn it off, Bradley's mother whispered. Please. No, James Thompson's voice cut through the room. You're going to watch every second. Just like my son had to live through it. The final video was the worst. Bradley and two others breaking into the Thompson mansion, rifling through Marcus's room, finding his mother's note. They'd laughed about it, planning how to use it against him. Home invasion. Detective Chun paused the footage. breaking and entering, theft of personal property, conspiracy to commit blackmail. These are serious crimes, Mr. Morrison. Your son is looking at multiple felony charges. Bradley's father leaped up. He's a minor. This is ridiculous. Sit down, Mr. Morrison. James didn't raise his voice, but the authority in it was unmistakable. Your son terrorized mine for weeks. He broke into my home. He threatened to expose private family matters to the media. The only ridiculous thing here is that you think money and privilege will make this go away. We can make a deal, Bradley's lawyer interjected. A private settlement. No deals. Marcus surprised himself by speaking. Every head turned toward him. Marcus, Bradley's mother tried for a sympathetic tone. Surely we can work this out. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Marcus stood, his voice growing stronger. Is that what you tell yourself? That it's normal for your son to follow me around with cameras? To write racial slurs on my locker? To break into my house and steal my personal things? The room fell silent. I wanted to belong here, Marcus continued, tears burning his eyes, but his voice steady. I tried so hard to fit in, but you never gave me a chance. You decided who I was the moment I walked through those doors. The illegitimate son, the charity case, the mistake. Principal Williams shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Thompson, perhaps I'm not finished. Marcus met Williams's eyes directly. You saw everything. You knew what was happening. But you were more worried about the school's reputation than my safety. You made me feel like I was the problem, like I didn't deserve to be here. That's not, Williams started. We have emails, Detective Chin interrupted. Complaints from teachers about the bullying. Reports from the school counselor. All marked, resolved with no action taken. The school board members exchanged alarmed looks. There's more, MS. Carter spoke from the doorway. She entered carrying a thick folder. I've been keeping records. Every incident, every complaint, every time the administration turned a blind eye. Not just with Marcus. There's a pattern here. A pattern that ends today. James stood beside his son. Principal Williams, you're facing criminal charges for negligence and endangering minors. The school board is facing a civil rights investigation. And Bradley? He turned to the now pale teenager. You and your friends are going to learn that actions have consequences. Bradley slumped in his chair, all bravado gone. What do you want? His father asked quietly. Marcus took a deep breath. I want you to understand what you did. Not just to me, but to others. I want you to face real consequences. And I want changes made so this never happens to anyone else. Detective Chin nodded approvingly. We'll need formal statements from everyone involved. And Mr. Morrison, given the severity of the charges, we're prepared to offer your son a deal. But only if he cooperates fully and names everyone else involved. Bradley looked at his father, then at Marcus. For the first time, fear showed in his eyes. Real fear, the kind Marcus had lived with for weeks. I'll tell you everything, Bradley whispered. The next hour was a parade of confessions. One by one, Bradley's friends were brought in. Some cried. Others tried to minimize their role. But the evidence was undeniable. The videos, the messages, the social media posts they'd thought were anonymous. Throughout it all, Marcus stayed standing. His father's hand remained on his shoulder, a constant reminder that he wasn't alone anymore. There's one more thing, Marcus said when the last confession was recorded. The boarding school? James flinched. Marcus, you were going to send me away. Marcus turned to face his father. Instead of dealing with the problem, you were going to make me disappear. Just like Mom did. The pain in James's eyes was raw. I thought I was protecting you. I didn't know how to be a father. I still don't. But I'm trying, Marcus. And I promise you, no more running. No more hiding. We face this together. For the first time in months, Marcus hugged his father. And for the first time, James hugged back without hesitation. Mr. Thompson? Detective Chin closed her laptop. We have enough to proceed with charges. But given your son's age and the publicity this will generate, I want to make sure this is what you both want. Marcus pulled away from the hug, wiping his eyes. I want the truth to come out. All of it. Maybe then things will change. They already are changing. MS. Carter said. She held up her phone, showing them the news headlines already spreading. elite prep school scandal, systematic bullying, and racial harassment exposed. Principal Williams buried his face in his hands. One more thing. Marcus turned to Bradley, who couldn't meet his eyes. The video of my mom. Where is it? Bradley's voice was barely audible. On my phone. We didn't really send it anywhere. We just wanted to scare you. Detective Chen took Bradley's phone as evidence. We'll make sure all copies are deleted. As they left the office, Marcus could hear the chaos spreading through the school. Teachers gathered in hallways, whispering about emergency meetings. Students huddled by lockers, phones buzzing with updates. The carefully maintained facade of Westbrook Academy was cracking, revealing the rot beneath. But for the first time since he'd arrived, Marcus walked those halls with his head high. No more hiding, no more silence, no more shame. He was Marcus Thompson, and he was finally ready to stand tall. The morning after the police intervention, Westbrook Academy felt like a different place. Yellow crime scene tape marked off sections of the hallway where Marcus's locker had been vandalized. Police officers stood guard at key entrances, checking IDs and turning away news vans. Marcus sat in the school library with Detective Chen, watching more security footage she'd recovered. His father had wanted to keep him home, but Marcus insisted on coming. He needed to see this through. There's something you should see, Chen said, queuing up a new video. This was from last week. The footage showed a group of younger students huddled by their lockers, clearly terrified as Bradley's group approached. The audio was clear enough to hear the threats, the demands for money, the same racial slurs they'd used on Marcus. You weren't the only one, Chen explained gently. After yesterday, other students started coming forward. Dozens of them. Marcus watched the screen, his throat tight. Why didn't they say anything? The same reason you didn't at first. MS. Carter joined them, carrying more files. Fear. Shame. The belief that nothing would change. The library doors opened. A small group of students entered. Younger kids Marcus recognized from the footage. They approached his table hesitantly. Is it true? A ninth-grade girl asked. Are they really going to arrest Bradley? Marcus nodded. The girl's shoulders sagged with relief. He took my brother's college fund, she whispered. Said he'd hurt him if we told anyone. Principal Williams just said we were making trouble. More students began trickling in. Each had a story. Money stolen. Property destroyed. Threats made. Lives terrorized. Williams had dismissed them all. Protected the wealthy bullies. Maintained the school's pristine image at any cost. We need your statements, Detective Chen told them. All of you. Everything that happened. One by one, they started talking. Years of abuse and silence poured out. MS. Carter recorded everything, her face growing grimmer with each revelation. The library door slammed open. James Thompson strode in, followed by several stern-looking men and women in suits. Dad! Marcus stood. What's going on? These are civil rights attorneys, James explained, and education oversight officials. They're here to help make sure every victim gets justice, and that Westbrook never covers up abuse again. The interviews continued all morning. More students arrived. Parents were called. Stories emerged of years of systematic discrimination, of wealthy students terrorizing scholarship kids, of administrators looking the other way. Around noon, Bradley Morrison's father appeared in the library doorway. The room fell silent. Marcus? Mr. Morrison's voice was subdued. May I speak with you and your father? Privately, they moved to a corner study room. Mr. Morrison had aged a decade overnight, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine shame. Bradley confessed everything, he said quietly. Not just what he did to you, but years of it. Other students, other victims. I had no idea. He took a shaky breath. I failed as a father. I taught him that money and privilege meant he could do whatever he wanted. I'm so sorry. Marcus studied the man who'd raised his tormentor. What happens now? Bradley's agreed to testify against everyone involved. He'll face consequences, juvenile detention, probably. But he's also agreed to mandatory counseling, anti-racism education, community service. Mr. Morrison's voice cracked. He wants to make amends. If you'll let him. Before Marcus could respond, commotion erupted in the main library. Principal Williams had arrived, flanked by expensive lawyers. "This is a witch hunt," Williams's voice carried through the glass. "These allegations are, on video." Detective Chin cut him off. "Every incident, every complaint you ignored, every time you chose the school's reputation over student safety. You can't prove, actually, a mess." Carter stepped forward. "We can." She held up her phone. "I've been forwarding every email, every report, every cover-up attempt to a private account for years. Just waiting for someone brave enough to speak up." Williams's face turned purple. "You had no right." "She had every right," one of the oversight officials interrupted. "And you're facing criminal charges for endangering minors, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations." Marcus watched through the study room window as Williams was escorted out. The principal's perfectly pressed suit couldn't hide his trembling hands, his crumbling facade of authority. "Your son, Mr. Morrison said quietly. He changed everything. His courage, it gave others the strength to speak up." James squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "That's who he is. That's who he's always been. I just wish I'd seen it sooner." The day continued in a blur of statements and revelations. More students came forward. More parents arrived, some angry, some crying, all demanding answers. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing the steady stream of police cars and official vehicles. By afternoon, the school board announced an emergency measure. Principal Williams was suspended pending criminal investigation. Bradley and his core group were expelled. A full review of all bullying complaints would be conducted. "It's not enough," Marcus told his father as they watched the announcement. "They'll just replace Williams with someone else who cares more about reputation than students." "You're right." James pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a draft press release. "That's why I'm establishing a foundation. Anti-bullying initiatives, scholarship programs, oversight committees. Real change, not just damage control. MS." Carter appeared with more files. "You should see this, Marcus." It was emails from teachers, dozens of them. Messages of support, apologies for not doing more, offers to testify about what they'd witnessed. "People knew," Marcus whispered. "They all knew." "Yes, MS." Carter's voice was gentle. "But they were afraid too. Afraid of losing their jobs. Afraid of retaliation. You showed them they don't have to be afraid anymore." As the sun set, Marcus stood at the library window, watching police cars and news vans slowly disperse. The school felt different now, smaller, less intimidating. The walls that had contained so much fear and silence were finally cracking, letting the truth pour out. "Ready to go home?" his father asked. Marcus nodded, but paused at the library door. The younger students who'd come forward were still there, sharing their stories, supporting each other. They waved at him as he passed. For the first time, Marcus felt like he truly belonged at Westbrook, not as the millionaire's son, not as the outsider trying to fit in, but as someone who'd helped break down walls of silence and fear. Someone who'd shown others they weren't alone. Yet he said, "Let's go home." The morning sun cast long shadows across Westbrook Academy's main entrance as Marcus climbed out of his father's car for the last time. 2 weeks had passed since the police intervention. 2 weeks of investigations, testimonies, and revelations that had shaken the school to its core. "You don't have to do this," James said, walking beside him. "We could have your things shipped." Marcus shook his head. "I need to do this. My way." The halls were quieter now. Bradley and his core group were gone, their lockers empty, their presence lingering only in the ongoing criminal investigation. Other students stepped aside as Marcus passed, some offering small waves or whispered thank yous. His old locker had been cleaned, the racist graffiti painted over. But Marcus could still see the ghost of those words, could still feel the weight of the fear they'd carried. "Marcus, MS." Carter stood in her office doorway. Her desk was packed in boxes. She'd been promoted to interim principal while the school board conducted their search for Williams's permanent replacement. "Just cleaning out my locker," Marcus said. She nodded. "A lot of changes coming. The oversight committee meets next week. Your father's foundation is already pushing for new anti-bullying protocols." She paused. "We'll miss you. Will you?" The words came out sharper than he intended. "I should have done more," she admitted. "We all should have." but you showed us what real courage looks like. Down the hall, a small group of students gathered, the ones who'd come forward after Marcus broke the silence. They'd formed a support group, meeting regularly to share their stories and help each other heal. They're stronger because of you, MS. Carter said softly. Marcus turned away from their grateful looks. He wasn't ready to be anyone's hero. He just wanted to be himself, whoever that was. His locker opened with a familiar creak. The inside was sparse now, just a few books and photos. His hand brushed against something tucked in the back corner. His mother's note, the one Bradley had stolen and tried to use against him. "You okay?" James asked, seeing his son's frozen posture. Marcus carefully folded the note and put it in his pocket. "Yeah, just memories." They worked in silence, packing his things into a cardboard box. Each item carried a weight beyond its physical presence. The textbooks he'd struggled to catch up with, the gym clothes that had been stolen and replaced, the family photo he'd kept hidden to avoid more taunts. Marcus Thompson, the voice made him stiffen. Principal Williams, former Principal Williams, stood at the end of the hall, his usual immaculate suit replaced by casual clothes. Two police officers flanked him, there to supervise as he collected his own belongings. "Mr. Williams." Marcus's voice was steady. Williams seemed to have aged years in 2 weeks. His shoulders sagged, his face lined with defeat. I owe you an apology. Just him." James's voice was cold. "No." Williams looked at the gathering students, the empty lockers of expelled bullies, the fresh paint covering years of ignored harassment. "I failed all of them. I was so focused on protecting the school's reputation that I forgot what a school is supposed to be." Marcus studied the man who'd dismissed his pain, who'd treated him as a problem to be managed rather than a student to be protected. "You had a chance to help us. Every day, you had a chance." "I know." Williams's voice cracked. "The board meetings, the criminal charges. I keep seeing your face. All your faces. Every time I ignored a complaint, every time I looked the other way." "Save it for your testimony," James cut in. "The civil rights investigation is just getting started." Williams nodded wearily and continued down the hall, the officers close behind. His footsteps echoed in the silence, marking the end of an era at Westbrook Academy. "Ready?" James asked, picking up the box of Marcus's belongings. "Almost." Marcus turned to the small group of students still watching. "Take care of each other, okay? Don't let anyone tell you you don't belong here." They nodded, some wiping tears. One girl stepped forward, the one whose brother's college fund had been stolen. "We're going to keep fighting, keep speaking up, like you taught us." Marcus managed a smile. "You always had the strength. You just needed to find it." The walk to the car felt longer than usual. Every step carried memories, both painful and transformative. The cafeteria where he'd finally broken down. The bathroom where his humiliation had been filmed. The principal's office where truth had finally triumphed over silence. "Your new school called," James said as they reached the car. "Everything's set for Monday." Marcus nodded, looking back at Westbrook's imposing facade. The place that had tried to break him had ended up making him stronger. The walls that had contained so much fear now echoed with hope for change. "Marcus?" A familiar voice called out. Bradley Morrison stood by the front steps, accompanied by a juvenile detention officer. He was there to give his final statement to investigators. Their eyes met across the parking lot. Bradley, stripped of his arrogance, his power, his illusion of invulnerability, looked impossibly young and scared. "I'm sorry," Bradley called out. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." Marcus held his gaze for a long moment. "Make it mean something," he finally said. "Make it real." Bradley nodded, tears visible on his cheeks, before the officer led him inside. "That was generous of you," James observed as they got in the car. Marcus watched Westbrook Academy disappear in the side mirror. He has to live with what he did. They all do. But maybe they can learn from it. Maybe something good can come from all this pain. James started the engine, but didn't pull away immediately. "I'm proud of you, son. Not just for standing up to them, but for showing mercy when you had every right to demand vengeance." "I don't want vengeance," Marcus said quietly. "I just want change. Real change." As they finally drove away, Marcus's phone buzzed with messages. Not threats this time, but support from his new school, welcomes from future classmates, updates about his father's foundation. The past couldn't be erased. The pain, the fear, the scars would take time to heal. But as Westbrook Academy faded into the distance, Marcus Thompson felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. He was ready for a new beginning. Roosevelt Preparatory Academy looked nothing like Westbrook. Instead of imposing brick and tradition, its modern campus sprawled across open green spaces. Students of every background moved freely between buildings, their laughter and chatter filling the morning air. Different, isn't it? James Thompson stood with Marcus at the administration building entrance. I did some research this time. Their diversity program isn't just for show. Marcus adjusted his new backpack, plain black, no designer labels. You didn't have to transfer me across the city. Yes, I did. James squeezed his shoulder. You deserve a fresh start. A real one. Inside, the walls displayed student artwork rather than portraits of past headmasters. A banner hung in the lobby. Welcome Marcus Thompson. Sorry about that, Dr. Rivera, Roosevelt's principal, hurried to greet them. The student welcome committee got a bit excited. We can take it down. It's okay, Marcus surprised himself by saying. The welcome felt genuine, not like Westbrook's forced tolerance. Dr. Rivera, call me Sarah, she insisted, gave them a tour. Every classroom they passed showed diversity in action. Study groups of different ethnicities working together, teachers who looked like their students, walls covered with multicultural projects. We heard about Westbrook, Sarah said quietly. What happened to you there? It won't happen here. We have zero tolerance for bullying or discrimination. Real zero tolerance, not just on paper. They passed a classroom where a heated debate was taking place. That's our social justice club, Sarah explained. They're discussing your father's new foundation, actually. The anti-bullying initiatives you inspired are making waves. Marcus felt his face warm. The story had made national news. The millionaire's son who exposed systematic abuse at an elite school. He'd been avoiding the coverage, but clips kept surfacing. Bradley's tearful confession, Williams's arrest, the ongoing civil rights investigation. Marcus? A voice called from down the hall. Oh my God, it is you. Marcus turned to see a familiar face. Michael Chun, his best friend from his old public school. The one he'd lost touch with after the DNA test changed everything. Michael's one of our top students, Sarah smiled. Maybe he could show you around? The two boys stared at each other awkwardly. Michael spoke first. I saw the news. About Westbrook. What they did to you? I'm sorry I wasn't there. I pushed everyone away, Marcus admitted. After Mom left, after the DNA test, I didn't know who I was anymore. Well, I know who you are. Michael grinned. You're the guy who always shared his lunch when I forgot mine. The one who stuck up for kids getting picked on. Money didn't change that. It just gave you a bigger platform to keep doing it. For the first time in months, Marcus felt tears that weren't from fear or pain. James watched the reunion with a gentle smile. I have some paperwork to finish, he said. Michael, can I trust you to show Marcus around? Yes, sir. Michael grabbed Marcus's schedule. Come on, you got to meet everyone. The whole school's been talking about you, not because of the money, he added quickly, but because of what you did. Standing up to those bullies, exposing the truth. They walked the campus, Michael pointing out shortcuts between buildings and quiet spots for studying. Other students waved or introduced themselves. No whispers followed them. No phones recorded their movements. The basketball team needs a point guard, Michael mentioned casually. You still play? Marcus hadn't touched a ball since Westbrook. Their sports had been another arena for exclusion and humiliation. Maybe, he said, if they'll have me. Are you kidding? After what you did at Westbrook, you're like a hero. I'm not a hero, Marcus cut in. I was scared. I just couldn't take it anymore. Michael stopped walking. That's what makes it brave, dummy. You were scared, but you did it anyway. You helped other kids find their voice. They reached the cafeteria just as lunch period started. Marcus tensed automatically, remembering Westbrook's blue tiles and hostile stares. But Roosevelt's lunchroom was different. Round tables encouraged conversation. Students moved between groups freely, sharing food and stories. No rigid cliques, no unspoken hierarchies. Marcus, over here. A group of students waved from a corner table. Michael led him over, making introductions. They asked about his interests, his favorite subjects, his taste in music. Normal questions, not thinly veiled interrogations about his father's money or his mother's absence. Is it true you're starting an anti-bullying organization? One girl asked. Marcus nodded. My dad's foundation is funding it. We're working with civil rights lawyers, education experts, trying to make real changes. That's so cool, another student chimed in. My little sister gets bullied at her school. Maybe you could speak there sometime? Share your story. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A new student stood frozen in the doorway, clearly overwhelmed. Her hijab marked her as visibly different, her posture radiating the same fear Marcus had felt at Westbrook. Without thinking, he stood up. Be right back. The girl flinched when he approached, but Marcus kept his movements slow and unthreatening. Hi, I'm Marcus. Would you like to join us? She looked at him, then at the diverse group at his table. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding, Marcus smiled. Trust me, I know what it's like to be the new kid. But here it's different. Slowly, she nodded. Marcus led her to the table, where his new friends immediately made space, offered to share their lunch, asked her questions about herself. Watching her gradually relax, Marcus felt something settle in his chest. This was what school should be. What he'd hoped for at Westbrook, but never found. His phone buzzed, a text from his father. How's it going? Marcus looked around the cafeteria. At Michael, his old friend, found again. At his new classmates, genuinely interested in knowing him, not his family name. At the new girl, already laughing at someone's joke. It feels like home, he texted back. Later, in English class, the teacher was discussing The Outsiders, the same book they'd been reading at Westbrook. But here, the conversation about belonging and identity felt different. Personal. Real. Marcus, the teacher called. Would you like to share your thoughts? At Westbrook, he would have stayed silent, afraid of drawing attention. But Roosevelt wasn't Westbrook. These weren't Bradley's hostile stares or Williams's dismissive glances. So Marcus spoke, about feeling like an outsider, about finding your voice, about the courage it takes to be yourself in a world that wants to make you invisible. When he finished, the class was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Thank you, the teacher said quietly, for reminding us that literature isn't just about stories in books. It's about our stories. All of them. After class, Michael caught up with him in the hall. Basketball tryouts are tomorrow. You coming? Marcus hesitated. I don't know. Come on, Michael grinned. Show them what Marcus Thompson can do. The real Marcus Thompson. And for the first time since the DNA test changed his life, since his mother's disappearance, since Westbrook's blue tiles and whispered threats, Marcus knew exactly who that was. He was his father's son, yes. But he was also his mother's strength, his old friend's loyalty, his new school's hope. He was the boy who stood up to bullies, who helped others find their voice, who refused to let fear win. He was Marcus Thompson, and he was finally, truly home. Yeah, he told Michael. I'll be there. 3 months had transformed Marcus Thompson's life in ways he never could have imagined. The morning sun streamed through Roosevelt Prep's windows as he dribbled down the court, feinted left, then drove right for a perfect layup. That's my point guard, Coach Martinez called out. Practice dismissed. Great work, everyone. Marcus grabbed his water bottle, still amazed at how different this gym felt compared to Westbrook's. Here, his teammates high-fived him after good plays, helped him up when he fell, celebrated his successes as their own. Thompson. Michael jogged over, grinning. Ready for the big speech? Marcus groaned. In a few hours, he'd be addressing Roosevelt's entire student body about his anti-bullying initiative. The foundation he and his father had started was gaining national attention, but public speaking still made his stomach churn. You've got this. Michael punched his shoulder. Just tell your story, like you did for my sister's middle school last week. That presentation had gone viral. Marcus Thompson, the millionaire's son who exposed systematic bullying at an elite school, speaking to a gym full of kids about finding their voice. The video had over 1 million views now. Marcus? Dr. Rivera appeared in the gym doorway. Your father's here. And you have some visitors? Marcus followed her to the administration building, where James Thompson waited with two familiar faces, Bradley Morrison and Principal Williams. Both were dressed in casual clothes, looking smaller somehow, less threatening than they had at Westbrook. What are they doing here? Marcus's voice came out sharper than intended. Hear them out, James said quietly. Please. Bradley spoke first, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine remorse. I finished the juvenile program. Counseling, community service, everything they required. But I wanted to do more. To really make amends, Williams stepped forward. Bradley approached me after my resignation. Suggested we work together, share our story from the bully's perspective, from the administrator who enabled it. Show others how toxic systems perpetuate themselves. We've been speaking at schools, Bradley explained. Warning signs of bullying. How privilege blinds you. The damage silence causes. Your foundation heard about it. They think our perspective could help. Marcus studied them both. Bradley, no longer the swaggering tormentor, but a chastened teenager trying to right his wrongs. Williams, the proud principal brought low by his own failures, now seeking redemption. You want to work with the foundation? Marcus asked. Only if you approve, Williams said. We understand if you don't want us involved. Marcus thought about Roosevelt's welcoming halls, about the girl in the hijab who now sat with them at lunch, about Michael's sister's school where kids still faced daily torment. Okay, he said finally, but on one condition. You tell the whole truth. Every ugly detail. No sugarcoating what happened at Westbrook. Deal. Bradley nodded quickly. I've already been doing that. It's not easy admitting who I was, what I did, but kids need to hear it. A bell rang, signaling the start of assembly. Students began filling the auditorium, buzzing with excitement about Marcus's speech. Stay, Marcus told his former tormentors. Watch what real change looks like. On stage, Marcus faced the sea of faces, different colors, backgrounds, stories, all mixed together. So different from Westbrook's rigid uniformity. 3 months ago, he began, I was sitting alone in a cafeteria, wondering if I'd ever belong anywhere. He told them everything. The DNA test that changed his life. His mother's disappearance. The systematic bullying at Westbrook. The day he finally broke his silence. But this isn't just my story, he continued. It's about every kid who feels different, who faces discrimination, who suffers in silence because they think no one will listen. In the audience, Bradley wiped tears from his eyes. Williams stared at his hands, shoulders slumped with shame. Change is possible. Marcus's voice grew stronger. I'm living proof. Look around this room. Look at how different we all are, but how we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. This is what school should be. What it can be if we're brave enough to speak up, to stand together, to demand better. He talked about the foundation's work. New policies being implemented, support systems being created, voices finally being heard. When he finished, the applause was deafening. Afterward, Bradley approached him hesitantly. That was powerful. I never understood. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but hearing you describe it, use that feeling, Marcus told him. Remember it when you speak to other schools. Make them understand the damage bullying causes. Marcus? Dr. Rivera called out. There's someone else here to see you. He turned to find a woman standing in the doorway, thin and trembling, her eyes red from crying. Mom? The room fell silent. Marcus hadn't seen her since the night she disappeared, leaving only a hastily scribbled note behind. I saw you on the news, she whispered. My brave boy, standing up to those bullies. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. Marcus felt his father's hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Where were you? Rehab, she admitted. After I left, everything was too much. The DNA test, the media attention, watching you move into that mansion. I couldn't handle it. But I'm better now. 6 months sober. Marcus looked at his father, saw the complex mix of emotions on his face. Dad, it's your choice, James said softly. Whatever you want to do, I'll support you. Marcus studied his mother, the woman who'd raised him alone for 12 years, who'd run when things got hard, but who'd fought her own battles to come back. Have you eaten? He asked. We were going to grab lunch. Dad, Bradley, Mr. Williams, we're all working together now, trying to make things better. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I'd like that. If it's okay. Yeah, Marcus smiled. It's okay. Later, sitting in Roosevelt's sunny cafeteria, Marcus looked around the table. His father, the businessman learning to be a dad. His mother, fragile but fighting to rebuild. Bradley and Williams, former tormentors turned allies. Michael, the old friend who never lost faith in him. His phone buzzed with another notification. More schools requesting foundation speakers. More students sharing their stories. More changes happening. You okay? Michael asked quietly. Marcus thought about the scared boy who'd sat alone in Westbrook's cafeteria, drowning in silence and fear. That boy was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd learned that belonging isn't about fitting in. It's about standing up, speaking out, and helping others find their voice. Yeah, he said and meant it. I'm okay. Because finally, after all the pain and fear and loneliness, Marcus Thompson knew exactly who he was. Not just the millionaire's son, not just the kid who exposed Westbrook's dark secrets, but someone who'd taken his own suffering and turned it into hope for others. He was home. He was healing. He was moving forward. And he was just getting started.